Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schwab Coaching. My name is Cameron May. I'm a Senior Manager of Trading and Derivatives Education here at Schwab, and this is Getting Started with Thinkorswim. And I had a question for my followers on social media, about 20,000 followers on social media, and I asked, what are your favorite must-have tools and features on Thinkorswim on the desktop platform? And today we're going to be going through some of those that my viewers said were their very favorite tools on Thinkorswim desktop. I think this is going to be an interesting discussion. I think there'll be something new for just about everybody. For some of you, it'll be revisiting familiar tools, maybe getting a brush up. For others, a nice introduction to an unfamiliar tool. But before we can get to any of that, though, let me first of all say hello to everyone who's chatting in. Great to see all the familiar names as always, and hello to anybody that's new. But hello there, Olga and Jackson, Josh, Mark. We have Rojo, Mighty Quinn, everybody else. Thanks for joining us week after week. We always do appreciate your attendance and your contributions to these discussions. If you're among those who are here for the very first time, I do want to welcome you as well. And if you're watching on the YouTube archive after the live stream is concluded, well, enjoy that recording. Those archived videos are a great way to watch these webcasts. But if you'd like to be here in the live stream audience, this is a Wednesday webcast series, and we kick things off promptly at 2 Eastern Time. Now, I also want to let my live stream audience members know that my very good friend Barb Armstrong has joined us in the chats today. She's going to be keeping an eye on any questions that come in through YouTube, and if I can't get to those, Barb's there to pick up my slack for me. So thanks for that, Barb. Barb and I would also like to issue an invitation to everybody listening to follow your favorite Schwab presenters on social media. So you can find Barb and me on X. You can find us on LinkedIn. Barb has posted our X handles there in the chat for the live audience. But you can find Barb on X at Barb Armstrong CS. You can find me and follow me on X at Cameron May CS, or you can hop over to linkedin.com/in and then /CS again, and that'll take you right to my profile on LinkedIn. And if you're following me on social media, if you're commenting on my posts, I just try to reply right back to you. It is the place to connect with me in between the live streams. But let's get into this discussion. Of course, as we do, we need to bear in mind the risks associated with trading and investing. These risks are real. So keep these disclosures top of mind. All corporate or issuer names and market data shown are for illustrative purposes only and are not a recommendation, offer to sell, or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security. Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as a sole means of investment research. And investing involves risk, including a loss of principal. All right, so agenda for the day, very simple. I asked my audience on social media what their favorite Thinkorswim desktop tools and features were. And today I wanted to go through some of those tools and features. We'll get through as many as we can. There's going to be a lot left, obviously, to explore in future episodes. But let's go right to Thinkorswim desktop. And we'll be doing 5 features on the paper money platform. And then we'll see how many we can squeeze in on the live platform, because there are some that are just exclusive to the live version. But the very first indicator, well, the very first tool that seemed to pop up was a chart indicator. And it is one that's, and this is not me soliciting this, just what happened in the responses. It's a proprietary indicator available only on Thinkorswim desktop for charting purposes. It's known as the market forecast tool. So let's load that up on our chart. I'm just going to start with the S&P 500. Let's click here on our edit studies icon, and I'm going to type in market forecast in our menu of potential indicators. Let's add that to our chart, click apply, and click OK. And with some of these tools, I'm just going to give a relatively short, brief, just a cursory introduction to the tool. And if you want to explore it more, what I'd invite you to do is go check out the video archives where we've done a closer examination of these tools. So for example, this market forecast tool, if you're not familiar with it, here's what I'd suggest you do. First of all, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just pop down below the video, click on the subscribe button. It only takes a second to do that. Doesn't cost anything to do it. But our Trader Talks Schwab Coaching Webcast channel on YouTube is where we house our live streams. So you can join our live streams here. You can find our playlists of previous webcasts and look through them just organized by webcast series, or you can do a keyword search. So for example, if I type in market forecast, I could probably just type in forecast, probably come up with a similar batch of videos. But here are several videos where we explored this market forecast indicator in greater detail. So The rest of these, as we go through these other tools on Thinkorswim Desktop, if you want to see them in greater detail, go check out these archives. Anyway, let's go back here, quickly acquaint ourselves with this indicator and talk about how it might be used to plan and place trades. All right, so here's our market forecast tool. You'll see that it consists of 3 lines. There's a really fast red one, there's a little bit slower blue one, a little bit slower green one. All right. If it's important to you, it's a red intermediate, the green, pardon me, the red momentum, the blue is the near term, and then the green intermediate. But the typical interpretation of this indicator, they're all oscillators that are range bound between 0 and 100, and they're intended to indicate over different time frames when prices seem to have reached extreme highs or extreme lows. Is it perfect? Of course it's not. There's no perfect indicator out there. But one common signal that traders will commonly use this indicator for is one that's fairly rare. The job that they're asking the market forecast to do is spot significant reversal points on a chart that may only happen every few months, every 6 months. We might only see signals like this every maybe 2 or 3 times a year, but it's known as a market forecast cluster. And it literally means that all 3 of our lines have clustered down close to 0 and specifically below a value of 20 at the same time. And what that might mean over a period of different time frames, maybe price has reached those extreme lows and possibly it's heading up from here. So here, there are a few example clusters here. And just because I knew I was going to be covering a lot of tools, I preloaded some drawings on the chart. So I'm going to come over here to my drawing set and let's load up our S&P 500 market forecast. And you'll see here's a blue line to indicate where 20 is. So when it's below 20, that's what we consider to be an oversold condition on our oscillators here. And let me just click on this right margin and drag it down a little bit so you can see my arrows a little bit better. When we get all 3 lines below 20 at the same time, for some, that may signal that price is potentially at or near a significant bottom. And you can see we've had a couple of clusters here where all 3 lines were below 20 right here. That looks like that was on March 20th of 2026. We got a second cluster on March 30th of 2026. And both of those did a pretty good job of identifying that the S&P, while it had been going down, afterward had more upside potential than down. That's just the way this worked out. It doesn't always work out, but in this case, worked out fairly well. And we really have not seen all 3 lines below 20 at the same time. There was a near miss right here, but we just didn't quite get below 20 right at about that level. So this can sometimes be applied. Yes, it's called the market forecast tool, but it's not exclusively for looking at market indices. We might also look at individual stocks. So for example, if we come over to our S&P 500 companies, let's just start at the top. Here's NVIDIA. Here's our market forecast. And let's load up a drawing set. These are a set of drawings that I made before the webcast started. And you can see this has also reached all 3 lines below 20 just on a couple of occasions over the last 12 months. Here's a cluster here. Looks like that happened right there on March 27th. You can see what price did after that. Here's another cluster here. That one was on June 24th. A little bit of choppiness for a while. Price never really reached much lower, but certainly more trading following that cluster signal at higher levels than at lower levels from the signal. Again, this is not a perfect signal. As is typical, the trader would probably want to have a plan for if the indicator failed. Maybe it was premature. Maybe I can come up with an example here. Let's go over to Apple, just the next largest company out there. Here's, did I save this? No, let's switch up our drawing set. There we go. And Apple has generated a few market clusters this year. One here on January 7th, a second right there on January 20th. You can see the 7th was a little bit premature. Price went lower. No signal is perfect. The 20th was pretty good. And also this one on March 30th. Pretty good cluster signal from there. So that's your introduction to the market forecast tool. It's not a perfect indicator. It is one that can only be found on Thinkorswim desktop, but it's one that popped up multiple times in my social media posts. Now, at least in the replies to those social media posts. Let's move on to tool number 2. So how about I'll just leave market forecast on here for a moment. That's okay. The second tool that came up multiple times was the heat map. So the heat map is a tool that might allow us to get a gauge of how, where essentially the heat is, which sectors or which stocks in which sectors are hot, and which seem to not be doing so well. So that can be found on the Market Watch tab, and it's known also as the Visualize tool. Helps you visualize what's going on through a display known as the heat map. So let's go to that Visualize heat map tool. And by default, this is showing us the S&P 500, all of the stocks comprising that index. We can see the S&P 100, we can see the NASDAQ 100, and the Dow Jones, and those different indices are indicated by, you can see the index name here in the center of a group of stocks. And then you'll notice white borders or outlines around these groups. And you can see around the S&P 500, there's a little bit thicker white border to distinguish it from the S&P 100 and from the Dow and the NASDAQ. So that's an important navigation feature of this. Mark says, hey Cam, with the market forecast indicator, do you want to say something about using on intervals that are less than daily? Mark, I can say, just like so many other technical tools, most technical tools can be applied across a range of different time frames. Just switch from a daily chart to a weekly chart, or a weekly chart to an hourly chart. But no technical indicator guarantees performance on a specific trade. We just need to know that. But yeah. Ali's Bar says, is it possible to have these indicators float separately from the rest of your chart? Yes, we could. We could actually detach the chart, hide the price chart, and just have the tool on there. I'll show that detach feature a little bit later. How about that? But in any case, a couple of other things to know about this, the heat map, is this is showing us how these stocks in these different indices are performing as of today. So which stock is having the worst day so far? Well, we could actually just look at the color. Ooh, there's a really bright red right down here. Moderna, you'll notice as I point at that little rectangle representing Moderna. Why is it so small? Because Moderna is a much smaller company than, say, Apple or Microsoft or NVIDIA. So the size of the rectangle represents the size of the company proportionate to the others. And the color scheme tells us how that stock is doing today. So the brighter the red, the worse the day the stock is having. The darker the red, the darker the green, the better the stock is having. So for example, Lumentum Holdings having one of the best days of any NASDAQ security and really any other security. Now we can also zero in using this heat map. Let's say I just wanted a closer look at the S&P 500. Well, if I click on the little indicator over here to the left, the heading, click on S&P 500. Now we're just looking at S&P 500. And since we have a broader view, we can also look at individual sectors within that index. So I can see here's information technology, financials, communication services, consumer staples, and just glancing at this, which sector appears to be maybe having the best day? It's not a great day for the markets right now. It's okay, but which sector seems to be leading the charge? Boy, sure is a whole lot of green over here in information technology, being led possibly by Arista Networks and F5 Incorporated. Energy is also having a pretty good day down here. You can see a lot of green. Which sector may be struggling a little bit? Probably healthcare. You can see a lot of red in healthcare being led by that Moderna sell-off. So that's a nifty little feature if we're just trying to get a quick pulse of what's happening across the different indexes, the different sectors. That's your heat map tool. So let's get on to tool number 3. which is the grid feature. Let's go back to our charts. This is going to allow me to use that detach features that I hinted at from the question that came in through chat. But for a lot of traders, this is very common. We like to keep our eye on multiple charts at the same time. And how might that be done? By the way, let me show you how you might do this, Ali's bar. If we just want to see just the indicator separately, you can actually hide the chart right there. Oh, actually, nope, I hadn't tried that before. It didn't work. Oh, well, I was thinking I was going to be clever. Nope, don't do that. Click on the C, bring your chart back. I'll have to experiment with a different way to do that. Okay, but what we can do is we can set up a grid. Actually, we could just detach. Let's answer that question. So if I detach my chart, what that does is it separates the chart from the platform. So it's operating as its own window. And now I can manipulate that window. So there's Thinkorswim still behind the chart, and I can move this over to my side monitor on the left of me. I can move it to the right of me. But another thing I can do is if I want to emphasize just this indicator, so it's effectively working as its own thing, we can just zoom this up and get a closer view of the indicator. I'm just going to tuck that back down to about the size it was before. So there's that, but I want to talk about grids for just a moment. This is if we want to keep our eye on multiple charts, and you've probably already seen we can do that by detaching one chart, moving it over the side. Now we have two charts. Well, what if we want both charts, or let's say two stock symbols on the same chart at the same time? Well, if we click on this little rectangle icon up in the upper right, this is the grid tool. And we can set up a grid of charts, maybe two side by side, maybe two up and down, maybe four in a grid like this. Let's do that. Let's choose four like this. And you'll notice now we have four charts. These are actually entirely functional, separate chart, what we call cells. So we might have Apple here. We might bring up, who knows, Microsoft here. We might come down here and type in NVIDIA, and maybe we want to track Tesla down at the bottom. So we have this grid of charts. And if we want to now detach this grid and move that over to the side, now we have multiple charts. Boy, now if you were sitting at my desk, you'd be seeing straight ahead, 4 charts, off to the right, 4 more charts, and we can really start to get a bunch of stuff going on. And it wasn't just 4 that we could have chosen here. We could have taken a grid by as many as 8 across and 4 down. Now, if we do that, the charts start to get kind of tiny though. So let me bring this back into your view. Just so you can see, I'm going to close this one out. So let's just work with this one. Each one of these charts is known as a cell. And let's say I just wanted to look at this one, but I wanted to keep an eye on the other 4 as well. What I can do is come up here in the top right of any one of these, click on that little menu icon, and let's maximize just this cell, or in other words, this chart. So now we're back to looking at Apple again. You might think, oh, we've lost our grid. Nope. We can actually go over here and click through those charts using these back and forth arrows. So if I click on the forward arrow, now we're looking at Microsoft and then NVIDIA. If I click back, we're back to Microsoft, back to Apple. And then if I want to see my 4 grids again, I can just click on this minimize cell icon. User says, so if you make changes to the settings on this detached screen, does it save the changes on the main grid? No, but you can save the grid. If you've set up a grid and you like the way that it's constructed, you can click right up here and choose, oops, it's the other one. Click right here, and we are going to, the only thing I consistently mess up is oh, I know what I'm doing. Getting ahead of myself. Anyway, yeah, to save the grid, we click on the grid itself and choose Save Grid As and give it a name. So for example, I've previously set up a grid that I'll sometimes make reference to called Sector Strength. So if I choose that grid, now if I choose Save Grid, I could just give this a name, and who knows what name you want to call this. Just give it a name that's meaningful to you and then save it. But then you can come up here and access this again right up here. It'll just show up as one of these saved grids. So I'm going to go to sector strength, and you'll notice it's going to say, Cameron, are you sure this is what you want to do? Yeah, let's click OK. And this loads up this grid of different sectors. There are 11 grids, so I set this up with, or 11 sectors, so I set up a grid of 12 charts, and this just displays those different sectors. If I wanted to see all 12, I can click my little minimize cell icon. There are my 12 sectors, and I can get a quick glance at how each of those are performing, or I can just maximize any one of those. All right, but let's take this back to just the one. So anytime we've been playing around with that grid feature, we can just click in the upper right again, choose just that one chart, and we're back to just our standard chart layout. So yes, you can save your grids. All right, let me just clean this chart up a little bit. This one now has our relative strength, which is just something I've saved on my sector grid. I don't need that for this discussion because that's not one of those things that came up in reply to my social media post. All right, what did come up was the anchored VWAP tool. So we're going back to the charts. A fourth stated favorite, this again came up a couple of times, was the anchored VWAP. If you're not familiar with this, this is a drawing tool that's sometimes used to identify price floors and price ceilings for the purposes of planning short-term trades. So let's go back here to NVIDIA. And I'm going to apply this indicator to our chart. Click on the little Edit Studies icon. Let's type in the word anchored, and then we can find anchored VWAP. That stands for volume weighted average price. But as I apply that to my chart, I'll quickly explain what this is. If you want to see this being used to set up example trades, you can go check out one of my previous archives. Just go do a keyword search like I showed you might be done for the market forecast tool. But let me click apply here and click OK. And let's talk about what this tool is doing. First thing it does, actually it might be helpful if I go back up here. You'll notice there's a -2, a +2, and then a date, basically. Well, it's a 20, there's actually a combination of numbers going on in there. Anyway, but it makes reference to the number 20 and January 1st. But basically what this is doing is it loads up a 20-day moving average, which is like a trend line, and then it draws potential support and resistance ranges above and below that trend line. So these are our volume weighted average price lines, 2 standard deviations above and below our middle line. So if you're not familiar with standard deviations, let me explain this kind of in the simplest language I can. Basically, we start at the beginning of the chart, 12 months ago. And then put yourself in the shoes, I'm going to give you an assignment. Put yourself in the shoes of a chart artist who's given an assignment by me to draw a line that will capture about 95% of tomorrow's trading activity. You don't know exactly what the future might hold, so you might look at how volatile the stock has been, find out where the average is as represented by this moving average line, and then draw a line where you think stock is unlikely to go above tomorrow, and a line where you think the stock is unlikely to go below tomorrow, and that becomes the upper and the lower line. It's attempting to capture 95% of price activity. Now, staying back there, I might say, okay, now expand that out through the entire year. Where might you draw that line to capture, hopefully, 95% of all trading activity? The concept here is the trader's trying to anticipate if our purple line is average, when have prices gotten a long way, let's put that in air quotes, a long way away from average? And where might prices revert back toward that average? Where have we reached extreme highs and where might we have reached extreme lows? That's known as the volume weighted average price. Now this is known as the anchored volume weighted average price because it doesn't have to start at the beginning of the chart. We can actually anchor it to some other point on the chart. And a common anchor point is to look for a major reversal. So for example, you'll see NVIDIA raced up here a long distance and then had a pretty significant reversal in the other direction. And for some traders, they might use that as their anchor point. And so the way to reset the anchor point for these three lines is to right-click on that reversal date and set the anchor date to that date. There we go. You'll notice that moves our lines to there, and it starts to draw a moving average from that point, and it draws our two standard deviation lines above and below that simple moving average. So that's how it's constructed. How's it used to trade? Well, a common approach is to look for price to reach the lower line and look for an entry and maybe exit either as we get back to the moving average, the assumption here being that price has gotten to an extreme low, maybe it'll go back to normal, normal being the moving average line. Could it also extend itself to an opposite extreme? That would be a more aggressive target. But yeah, trading from the lower band to the middle line, or from the middle line to the upper band. So that's kind of interesting. We're right back down here to that middle band again. But that's your brief introduction to the anchored VWAP tool. Now, obviously, I'm leaving some questions unanswered here as I'm going through these tools on thinkorswim. These are just viewer favorites. I knew I was going to have to kind of give these a quick treatment and then move on to the next one. But again, if you have an interest in seeing these in greater detail, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Go to the channel homepage and just do a search. So like if I type in AVWAP, the acronym for Anchored VWAP. Mark says, love this VWAP indicator, Cam. Can't believe I've never used it before. You tend to use the 1 standard deviation, a 2 standard deviation, linear regression in place. It's similar concept, right? Yeah, but there's a discussion of the anchored VWAP in greater detail. All right, anyway, back on to what tool are we on now? Number 5? Ooh, risk profile. Guys, I could spend absolutely 45 minutes talking about this next tool. I'm going to give an apology to those who are more stock traders and investors. This next tool is probably targeted more toward our options traders. But let's just say, since we're looking at NVIDIA, let's say that a would-be options trader notices that price has come down, it's sitting right on that middle line. Maybe they think it's likely to go back toward that upper line. And they're going to do a bullish options trade as a consequence. Maybe they buy a call. Maybe they buy a call vertical spread. Let's do that. Let's go to our trade tab. Let's make sure that we're looking at, what's my chart linked to? Oh, my chart's not linked. Let me link that. There we go. And then let's type in NVIDIA again. I make that link here to make sure when I switch to a different function, it loads up the same symbol. Anyway, let's say we go down to the 18th of September, and where was our line right now is about 210. What if we were to buy a call vertical below 210? Let's go in the money a little bit. So my apologies. If you don't, I unfortunately don't have time to explain how a call vertical works. Just understand it's an option strategy that benefits best if the stock stays above the 2 contract prices that we're dealing with. Okay? So for example, if I were to buy the 202.5 call and sell the 205 call to create this vertical spread, the trader is really looking for the stock to be at or above 205 as time moves forward. So let's do that, 202.5 and 205. I'm going to come up here where it says spread single. Let's choose that we're going to trade a vertical. And I'm going to create an order for that. Looks like that's going to cost us around maybe $1.50. I'm going to click on that. And let's just say, let's put in a limit order of $1.50 for this trade, this example. Well, this vertical spread, the trader who's trading this probably already knows a little bit about how much it can make, how much it can lose, where it might make or lose its money. But there's also a tool on thinkorswim known as the risk profile that shows us a profit and loss chart for this trade. So to do this, to analyze the profit and loss scenario for this trade, I'm going to right click on the order before I submit it, and I'm going to select Analyze. And that takes us right to a profit and loss chart right here. The profit and loss chart has two lines. It has a red line. I've changed the color. So if your color is a little bit different, my apologies. I did change the color so they'd kind of stand out a little bit more to my audience. But in any case, we have this red profit and loss chart, and then we have the blue one. And these are showing us how this trade is likely to do right out of the gates today, and then also how it would likely do at expiration under a range of assumptions. Notice on this grid, we have plus and minus. This is how much we might make or lose. And then we have different numbers down at the bottom, growing in size. This is hypothetical prices of the stock in the future. All right, so 200 bucks, 210, 220, 230. And we can start to ask ourselves questions. Hey, with the stock right now at about 210.89, that's what this dashed vertical line is. I wonder how this vertical spread would perform, let's say at expiration, if the stock went up to 220. Well, 220, I can intersect with the red line and look at the red number. How would our trade perform if we're at 220 at expiration? That would be a $100 profit in this $2.50 wide spread. We spent $1.50 to set it up. Those that trade spreads know that leaves 2.5 minus 1.5 leaves $1 profit, 100 bucks on 100 shares. Anyway, but this is just showing us the price and profit intersection is maximum gain down here. What if the stock, which is at 210.91, falls to $200 at expiration? Uh-oh. As I mentioned, we prefer to be above 205. This would be below the contracts we're trading. We'd be at our max loss territory. And in that case, we look over here. Our number is now red, minus $150. So this tool, among so many other functions, can outline potential outcomes for our trade based on what price is doing. Price goes up, price goes down. That can be very useful for individual trades, but this also has the capability of showing us how an entire portfolio might perform as, let's say, the S&P goes up and down. So if you want to see those other tools being demonstrated, what might you do? Go to the ARC and look for risk profile. Yep. This was a 5-minute introduction to this tool. If I wanted to see a deeper discussion, let's go to our YouTube channel and type in risk profile. And there's 45 minutes dedicated to Let's Learn Thinkorswim's powerful risk profile tool. All right, so that's tool number 5. I think we're gonna get this done. We have 2 more that I wanted to get. I was hoping to get through 7. Another tool that came up all the time was the scan tool. We can scan. Thinkorswim has a number of scan. They're sort of search or filter scan tools that allow us to search for, let's say, stock potential trade candidates, options trade candidates. Let's do a stock trade candidate. Yeah, Mark, is that the fastest introduction to the risk profile ever? Yep. Are you thinking, hey, Cameron, you didn't even explain the blue line in any great detail. You didn't show how to adjust for time and volatility. Nope, I don't have time, but I have in the past. If the risk profile intrigued you, go check out that archive. All right? But let's talk about the scan tool for just a moment. And I'm going to leave our paper money account and go over to our fake live account. That's the one that I have loaded up with the black background. So let's go to the scan tool. This is going to be the stock hacker. And we're going to look for something specific from our stock hacker. We talked about a market forecast, because somebody brought up the market forecast tool, market forecast cluster. They don't happen very often, as I mentioned, on the S&P. It's happened once this year, on NVIDIA twice, on Apple 3 times. Doesn't happen very often. So I wonder how we might find S&P companies with a market forecast cluster right now. Well, I've actually built a scan on the Thinkorswim scan live platform that's intended to do just that. So I'm going to go up here to my little menu icon. What this scan tool allows us to do is we can choose all sorts of different characteristics of a stock that we might be interested in, and then put in specific criteria. So for example, maybe our traders interested in only trading large cap stocks. So they might choose market cap here. They might put in a minimum of $10,000 million in market capitalization. And there are about 2,400 of those companies. This is going to start to narrow down the field of potential trade candidates. And we could choose from other defaults in this drop-down menu. Let's see, MBH says, is it possible to combine two scans or quickly copy the criteria of the scans? So to merge them, I'm not sure. I'd have to play around with that, MBH. I've always just plopped it in there. But let me show you this scan that I built. I'm going to come up here and load what I call, it's my personal market forecast cluster scan. Let me show you what's involved in this. First of all, we're scanning just in the S&P 500. So I chose that from the public watch list right here, just in the S&P. I then loaded up several study scans. So right up here, instead of choosing from the default filters or the default menus, I just deleted those, XXXX, deleted those because I didn't use them. And instead, I chose a series of 4 study filters. Then within those filters, I set those up to be customized. So let me edit this. When we choose custom filter, we can add our own condition. And in this case, I chose a condition that the market forecast momentum line is less than 20, so down below 20, within 2 bars, or in other words, within 2 days. And then I just repeated that, the momentum line, the near-term line, the intermediate line, and then also required that the stock, when we're looking for clusters, typically we get clusters because price has been coming down, and that might just be true of a stock that's been going down for years. So I put in a final requirement that the current price of the stock is within 20% of the 252-day high, in other words, the 1-year high. Now, this is a quick introduction to this tool. I have a video that shows exactly how it was built. If you want to go check it out, guess what you do? Go to Market Forecast, do a quick keyword search to find that, that video, and you can watch that. But let's just run a scan. Let's see how many companies in the S&P 500 have a cluster today. And here they are. Well, there's Ralph Lauren. What are you luxury brand buyers seeing on that chart? Let's go have a look at Ralph Lauren. Let's go to our charts. Bring up Ralph Lauren. Let's get rid of that anchored VWAP. Let's throw our market forecast back on here and see, is there a market forecast right now? There certainly is. Interestingly, there was one right back here that did a pretty good job of identifying this low. Is there another one? Is that a market forecast? Yep, there's a cluster right there that did a pretty good job of identifying that low. They're not always guaranteed to work, but in this case, for Ralph Lauren, did a pretty good job. Now, someone's probably going to say, Cameron, can you share this scan? I can. Yep. Let me do this for you. Let me share this scan. We'll just call this the cluster scan and share it. And I'm going to post that into the chats, just with a reminder that shared scans are not guaranteed as to timing or accuracy. MBH says, is it possible to enter a scan on something like bid size is higher than ask size? If so, how? Okay. Unfortunately, the clock is ticking on us. My apologies. I won't be able to give that, that question proper treatment. But we have one other tool that I wanted to give you a quick introduction to, and it is the on-demand feature on Thinkorswim. This is a nifty tool that some traders will use to back test stock trading strategies, options trading strategies. What it does is it allows us to choose a date in the past, and Thinkorswim just sort of resets itself back to that date. It loads up all sorts of data, loads up charts, it loads up option chain quotes, and in real time, as of a selected moment sometime in the past, and we can actually look back years, we can get in our time machine, go back in time and pretend like we're trading, and then advance time to see how those trades are going. So this tool is also only available on the live platform. Can't find it on Paper Money, but I'm going to click on demand from right here. Actually, let's do this. Let's go to our chart so you can see this. So here's the S&P 500. You can see right now it's August 26th. We're looking at a chart of the S&P 500 as of August 26th. Seems obvious. But if I click on demand, it gives us a description of what this tool entails. But I'm going to click OK. And this is going to start going back to the last time I used this tool. Last time I used it, we went back to July of 2024. So this is actually skipped back in time. And if we look back at the chart, the last candle is actually July 15th of 2024. We're back in time. We can now go place options trades if we wanted to, or stock trades. Go to the option chain. We could bring up a stock. Let's say we bring up Apple, and this is no longer the options chain for Apple today, but the options chain for Apple in 2024. And we could start to place trades. We could monitor the progress of those trades on our monitor tab, just like we would with a typical trade. And then we can advance time, maybe a day, maybe a week, see how those trades play out. So JDLMI says, how's on demand different from ThinkBack? So ThinkBack is an extremely stripped down version of on demand. That's the basic answer. On demand is way more detailed. So yeah. But in any case, there's a quick introduction to on demand. If you want to see that being demonstrated, final reminder, if you're new to our channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because you can join live streams here on our YouTube channel. You can find playlists, but you can also do keyword searches. For example, maybe I want to learn more about this on-demand tool, how to backtest trades and indicators using on-demand in Thinkorswim. Yeah. Guys, thank you for your help in preparing me for this webcast. I knew it was going to be a bunch. I knew there were going to be unanswered questions, but I wanted to provide you with resources to address those. So remember these archives. If something has sparked your interest, make sure that you check the archives. Make sure that you're subscribed to our channel. Click on that subscribe button down below the video right now. It only takes a second, doesn't cost anything to do that. Another thing that Barb and I would suggest you do is to follow your favorite Schwab presenters on social media. You can find us on X, you can find us on LinkedIn. Barb can be found on X at Barb Armstrong CS. You can find me on X and reply to posts like the one that I asked about for this webcast. And if you reply to one of my posts, I just try to reply right back to you. For example, I just made a post giving you a choice. Hey, which one do you choose if you had this choice? Guaranteed 10 grand or a 25% shot at 50? That'll be interesting. About 14 people have answered that already in just the last hour. Then I'll go in and just have a sort of back and forth. I'll just reply to these comments. But guys, if you're wondering how to connect with your favorite Schwab presenters between the webcasts, it's on social media. So you can find us on X. You can also find us on LinkedIn. For LinkedIn, you just go to linkedin.com/in/CameronMayCS. Give me a follow here. And if you reply to one of my posts here, I just try to reply right back to you as well. Hey, everybody, thanks for all the thumbs up out there. I see about 100 people watching the live stream, and we have 45 that have already clicked the like button. That's really appreciated. It's a pat on the back to your presenter, but it also gives my video a nice boost in the YouTube algorithm, helps more people find these webcasts. So thanks for doing that. Everybody, I'm going to let you go. But until I see you again, I'll be looking for you in a future webcast. I'll be looking for you on social media, on X and LinkedIn. But until that moment arrives, I wish you the very best of luck. Happy trading. Bye-bye.